Welcome to another episode of my podcast. That's fine with me. Today we're going to be talking about Bridgerton, and specifically, I wanted to talk about titles because while I was watching the series, I had no idea who these people were. Okay, so I do know about dukes, I do know a little bit about lords, but who is the rest? All of them had absolutely different names and absolutely different titles. That's why I had to dig in and find this information. Of course, during my school years and when I was a student, I had to learn this whole thing. But, here I am right now learning more about the titles. And I can tell you, I couldn't find a lot of information about that when I was like searching for different titles. No one was talking about lords because you could refer to certain titles, certain, let's say, noble, certain nobility with lord and lady, but who were they in real life? I have no idea. We're gonna, talk about this a little bit later. Right now, I want to talk a little bit about fashion of Bridgerton and about the series itself. So it started in 1813. Early 19th century, I really loved the fashion of this year. First of all, the puffiness of the dresses were gone, and no one really cared about those huge dresses. It was super uncomfortable. This something that you see in the series is super close to what they actually wore. It was influenced by the French Revolution that happened in 1780s, and then it just brought some new fashion ideas to the world and especially influenced Great Britain itself. I mean, fashion, Great Britain. And of course, you can see in the series, women wore corsets, they wore high-waisted dresses. It was sort of straight dress, no puffiness, and a lot of lightweight muslin. They did wear some feathers in their hair, but, it was similar to something that we see. In 1810, the dresses were similar to something that was right at the beginning of the 19th century. The only difference, it still was neoclassic, and people were obsessing over lightweight dresses, but they were inspired and influenced by classic, not only French fashion, but ancient Egypt, from Greece, Rome, all of it. And right now, I want to talk about titles that were described in the series, though I had no idea who all of these people were and how they were related to each other. And the series showed us England, 18th century England, 19th century England. That's why I know there is a difference in nobility, but what is this? I try to break this down as simple as possible, but I do know there's some more branches and so many more to that. So don't really blame me if I don't tell you every single detail about their titles, because quite honestly, I didn't really get this from the bottom. Like a lot of different channels and a lot of articles, they're not providing the information who these, let's say, titles were and what they were doing. Okay, so it started with feudalism. So it was mainly social and political system. And the crown divided grounds between nobles, different titles, in exchange of services. In case crown needed these people and needed their lands, and specifically their, let's say, people, servants, peasants from these lands, they would participate in war. That's why it was like a division for this political services mainly. And there were like 5 ranks, but the first ever rank that existed in 1066 or 1066, I don't know how to pronounce this year, it was in England and Saxons before Norman conquest. So the first ever title that existed was Earl. Earl could be referred as the county. His wife, let's say, was countess, and they could be referred as lord and ladies at the same time. Then William the Conqueror came in like a little bit later. He conquered Saxons, and then he introduced the new title as Baron. So the first one is Earl, then Baron, and they were pretty much equal up until the point where it wasn't equal. Eventually, Earl had become a little bit higher than Baron, and Baron is the lowest or title of all. And in 1336, King Edward III introduced the first ever title called Duke. He presented this title to his son, and he called his son the Duke. He wasn't a prince, he was a duke of some land, and the land was the Cornwall. Today, there are only 24 people in Great Britain with the same title, the Duke title. One of them was Prince Charles, if I'm mistaken. Now he's King Charles. I don't know if he has this title yet, but I know that he used to have the title of Duke. And this is the highest title of all. And let me tell you guys, when I say that you can call Duke and his wife Duchess, you can refer to them as your grace. And frankly speaking, from the series, we could get this idea that Duke was a big deal, and you could refer your grace and as Duke as well, I believe. Then, then we have three main titles: Duke, Earl, and Baron. Now, later on in 1385 was introduced a little bit different title that was right after Duke. It was just a division between Duke, Earl, and Marquess. Originally, Marquess came from Germanic lands, let's say, and it was introduced by the Richard II. And a lot of earls were not happy about the fact that Marquess were higher in rank than earls, and there was a strategic act behind this rank, because Marquess, they didn't have their lands on the borders, and borders were strategically important for war. That's why they were a little bit higher than earls, but that was the only difference. So they were a little lower than dukes, but they were higher than earls because the location was on the border of the country. And for females, you can call them Marchioness, and for men, you can call them Marquess. They could be referred as lords and ladies, or most honorable. And of course, in 1440 was the final, let's say, title that was introduced that came to England, and that was above Baron, Viscount. The difference, just like Viscount, is the same thing as Viscount, as vice president, but Viscount. So Count was Earl, and Viscount, it was some sort of vice Earl. There were some kind of sheriffs for Earls. That's why they were higher than barons, but lower than Earls, because they were doing a little bit different kind of jobs. And that was it. Actually, you can refer to them as Viscountess or Lord and Lady. That is pretty much it. Frankly speaking, it's not really hard to remember, but I kind of missed the point where a lot of them in the series were called Lord and Ladies. And specifically, you couldn't call Duke Lord or Lady. They were specifically Duke and Duchess. As for Marquess and Marchioness, you could call them Lord and Ladies. You could. But in the series, Bridgertons, they lived, I guess their location was in England, and I don't really remember them mentioning anything about some lands that were on the border. That's why I believe they were earls. Probably they were earls, but I don't really think they were viscounts. I don't remember viscount, but they mentioned something about viscounts, and they were not viscounts. I guess they were earls. They were lords and ladies. It wasn't it wasn't bad. I mean, it was quite honorable and noble at the same time. I don't really think they were barons. I believe some of them were barons. I don't even know how you refer a baron, lady and lord, or maybe not. I don't know. And for a viscount, you could refer lord and lady as well. So, switch your imagination and think for yourself who they really were, Bridgertons. I believe they were earls, but I'm not really sure. But they were not probably marquesses, because they did not have land on the border. And they were not barons because it was too low. Viscounts, I don't really think so. They kind of hired someone as a viscount, if I'm mistaken, or they talked to a viscount, but they were not viscounts, if I'm mistaken. So now let's talk a little bit about the whole series, what I really liked about that and what I did not. Frankly speaking, it reminded me of a Gossip Girl that aired in 2006. I wasn't a huge fan of Gossip Girl, but I guess in 2018, I watched the entire series just because I was bored and I had nothing else to watch. It was unbearably boring at the end of the season, and I kind of knew who was a Gossip Girl. That was Den, spoiler alert, but it was nice, sort of nice. Bridgerton, given the same impression, because a higher society, noble society with titles, as well as Gossip Girl, people with money, with lots of money. They're slipping around with each other. They're gossiping. The only difference is that in Bridgerton, they were not allowed, in higher society, they were not allowed to sleep with each other. But they actually did. They actually did. We're talking about someone from middle class, I guess, and higher class. And guys, they did not care. They did not care. They actually slept with women. I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe it might be true that they actually slept around with everyone else. That's why it's a really weird and corny way of Gossip Girl. The only difference is that we know that Hermione, or I don't know, the orange, like the red hair girl, she was a gossip girl that pretended to be an old woman, but they actually showed us right at the end of the season. I guess it would have been much better if we didn't know who this was and try to guess. They kind of showed us everything. There were no intrigue in the series. And I actually knew from the first episode that there is going to be a love story, love line between the Duke and the Bridgerton. I don't remember her name. I did know that they would get married, and they did get married, and then they carried on with a little bit different Bridgerton. So I believe the end of the series is going to be when all of the Bridgerton are going to get married, or when the ratings are going to drop. I don't know. It was a little bit boring sometimes and a little bit agonizing sometimes. I did not really like the sex scenes. I feel it's too crazy. I don't really think people, even married people, would allow themselves to have sex every single day in front of every single servant, just not caring about this. I don't really know. I don't know. So yeah, for me, there were no intrigue. I didn't really like it. It was like a smooth pace of life, and I knew that they would eventually have a baby. I needed something, probably divorce, maybe. I needed someone to show me some drama. Like no drama. Even with the Gossip Girl, there were no drama. And I did know that eventually the pregnancy of their, like, I don't know, cousin would come up, and she wouldn't get married with a Bridgerton because marriage was included in the first season. 2 marriages were not included in the first season. And about the prince, I actually really like the prince. Not because he was handsome or something. Duke was handsome as well, but it's so weird. I mean, you started this kind of deal to find a partner, and then you sort of fell in love, and when the prince came into the picture, you were like, no, I need a duke who would not give me kids, and I didn't care about any of it. And believe it or not, I did not believe in a thing that a duke would refuse to have kids willingly just because he wanted to prove his point to his dead. I don't know. So yeah, that's why you know that they're going to be together from the first episode. If with like Carrie and Vic, you still had no idea, you had your doubts, but you still had no idea if they're going to end up together. Here, you knew everything for the first episode. Another thing about the diversity in the cast, like a lot of Black people, a lot of Asians, Indians. I feel like it's cool. I didn't really mind. It's just not a documentary film. It's for entertainment purposes only. And I actually found an article or some mention that let me tell you, in the 18th century, a composer and spoke keeper, Ignatius Sancho, was the first Black person of African origins to vote in parliament elections and became a symbol of the humanity of Africans and immorality of the slave trade. That's why 18th century, and they did have someone from Black society, African society, let's say. That's why I feel it's okay that they show this in the series. Probably they didn't have a real title as dukes. I don't really think so. But still, in the 18th century, there was a mention of a Black person who had some sort of title, probably not title, but was recognizable and was respectful. That's why, yeah. So the storyline is really weak because the gossip they provided was weak as well. Nothing that would traumatize someone, and nothing that would sort of like bury these people under the ground, and probably just like they could easily redeem themselves and they could easily get back to the society. No, I guess nothing like this would matter. It was too boring, let's say, to watch sometimes, and even painful. Sometimes I was cooking, I was doing the dishes, and I didn't even care if I lose any point from the series because it wasn't that important. I didn't really like the queen. Most of this, it's just like the queen wasn't the queen. She was this party girl that cared only about drugs. I believe these were drugs. I don't really know. She cared about the intrigues that happened. She read the stupid, let's say, paper, some gossips, and she did not participate in any sort of ruling. I know that wasn't a part of the series that they had to show us the queen and her ruling, but at least not to show her as some party woman with no dignity and just I don't know, gathering gossips just for the sake of gossips. It's not a strong figure, something that I expected from the queen. So yeah, and there were no king. He was diagnosed with I don't know, some memory loss, I believe. And who was ruling the country? I'm interested in this. Who was ruling the country? I know, but I could only see that the eldest brother from Bridgerton, he was doing a lot of work. Duke was doing some work when he came back from his trip, and king and queen did absolutely nothing to provide for their country. So that was interesting and weird at the same time. I did not understand the storyline between Duke and the fighter who was with his family. As I can tell, they were not poor. They were some sort of businessman, and he was some sort of businessman, and the Duke, he actually was fighting with him. I'm not really sure if that was okay to fight a Duke and some random guy. How did they know each other? I mean, I have this was the main problem of the series, because except for one episode where they showed the treatment of Duke's father and the Duke, how he was growing up, that his father didn't really love him, that was it. I did not see a lot of history behind that, why this happened, who did this to this. And just I was lacking a lot of information. Specifically, I can talk about the second season where they showed the death of the father, and it was shown only because they wanted to, I guess, carry on with the line of the bee that stained the girl, the one that he fell in love with, the eldest brother of Bridgerton's. I guess this was the only reason they showed us the storyline that his dad died. But it wasn't for the purposes of showing us the story of the family, how they survived, why they had such a problem, how they were dealing with these issues. Probably that wasn't the meaning of the series. It wasn't important for the series, but it was a little bit important for me, I guess. And yeah, I was a little bit tired of the second season, because I knew that it's going to be pretty much similar thing. Parties, talking, sex, and that's it. And the third season is going to be pretty much the same. Another diamond of the season, a little bit more parties, a little bit more gossip, and that is it. Probably. I'm not really sure. And it's given the impression of the series that you want to watch once if you can finish the series, and that's it. You're not going to be interested in rewatching this. I know that a lot of people are huge fans of Breaking Bad, and they really love this, series. That's why they're ready and they're willing to watch it over and over again. Can't say I'm a huge fan of Breaking Bad. It's funny, it's weird, it's cool, but it's a little bit boring. It's a little bit boring sometimes. But they show the characters in the best way. They show the whole story, like they showed some flashbacks when they needed to show them. They showed us why this happened, what the cause of this, let's say, drug dealer situation. They showed us the inevitability, that it was inevitable for them to kill some people because they were involved in their business. Most of this was reasonable. For this series, it's more like, oh, you're stupid. You don't really care about titles. You don't really care about history. We're just going to show you how people sleep with each other, how they gossip, and how they party. And that's it. And we're going to show those over and over again in every single season. I don't know. I'm not really sure that that's cool. That's why I was lacking, I guess, a little bit of description, who they actually were, what kind of lords they were, what they were doing. I was missing this a lot. But I don't know, guys. What do you think? Maybe I'm exaggerating, and I'm probably adding a little bit extra drama where it's no drama and it's just for entertaining purposes only. And I know that's for entertaining purposes only. It wasn't entertaining. That is the problem. That is an issue. I didn't really like a sense of humor. I don't remember if I laughed during the series. I don't remember if I was hooked up on the series that I want to watch another episode. I really want to watch a little bit different episode. It was more like, oh, I have nothing to do. Okay, Bridgerton, let's watch it. It was more like this. Wasn't hooked up. So yeah, that's it, guys. Don't forget that I have my mail down in the description box. You can ask me any sort of questions or share your experience. They're going to be 100% anonymous. And one more point, all of this information that I shared in today's video, it's for entertaining purposes only, and it's my opinion. I'm not saying it's the only way around. Probably something is just my imagination, probably something is not. So think for yourself, and that's it. I love you all, and I'm gonna see you next time. Bye bye.